Right, we're going to go back to the Reform Conference now. It's being held in the City of London, of course, because he's the Shadow Chancellor, and this
he's
is
not the Shadow Chancellor.
Shadow Chancellor Robert
He's
Jenrick.
just a naughty boy.
It's very good to be here. Now, look, I read in the papers this morning a commentator saying that they thought that I'd been appointed Reform's Shadow Chancellor because I had experience sat around the cabinet table. And of course, there's truth in that. I sat around the cabinet table and I saw up close what government gets right and what it gets wrong. And that is going to be important if Reform forms the next government of this country. But the table that I sat around that was actually the most formative to me was not the one in Downing Street. It was the one at home with my mum and dad in Wolverhampton in the 1980s. It was growing up there that I saw my dad, Bill, who you just watched in that video, a man who was not born into a life of privilege, a Manchester lad. He moved to the Black Country to take up a job in a foundry. He'd left school at 16. He went to night school, he got some qualifications, and around that kitchen table, he set up a business. He started it there, and with a white van on our drive. And it wasn't easy, as anyone who set up a business is a sole trader, has gone it alone knows. But just like all of those people who've done that, and are doing that right now across our country, through sheer grit and determination, he built that business. In time, he set up a shop, and then he had his own factory. He was able to build a more comfortable life for my mum, my sister, and me than he had ever been able to imagine when he was growing up. In building his business, he provided hundreds of jobs, good jobs, secure jobs, the kind that offered families peace of mind, the chance to get on in life. But for too many people right now, across our country, those opportunities are fading. They're victims of a 30-year-long economic consensus which has failed, and mismanagement by a Westminster class who bet that just because Britain was a rich and powerful country, it always would be. They were wrong. In 1997, people's living standards in our country were closing the gap with America. Today, incomes are closer to Romania's than to those of the United States. And why is that? They spent money we didn't have, more than doubled our debt. They increased taxes to record levels. They failed to reform the public sector, where productivity has barely moved in 30 years. They blindly pursued net zero, driving industrial electricity prices to the highest level in the developed world and killing British manufacturing in the process, of the kind that I knew when I grew up in the West Midlands. They eviscerated the tax base. Today we have just 80,000 companies with a turnover of £5 million or more. That's a quarter fewer per capita than there are in the United States. The recent succession of prime ministers in my old party and now in Labour lacked the vision for what we could do to arrest our national decline. They were defeatist, and each in turn, they were defeated. The financial crash should have been a big wake-up call, the warning to address the profound structural weaknesses in our economy. The economic shock of COVID might have been another one. Build back better, we were told. Well, they were both missed, and it now falls to reform, to fix Britain with a new economic model. Now, at this stage, I understand you will be wary of false prophets. Many prospective chancellors have offered their diagnoses of the problems facing our country. They've even alighted on some of the same remedies in speeches much like this one. Before the election, I bet some of you in this room went to listen to Rachel Reeves. She pledged financial stability and investment. She said she would unleash the potential of British workers. And to a weary public, It sounded promising. The reality? Instead of offering stability, she's unleashed chaos. Benefit cuts in, benefit cuts out. Inheritance tax up, inheritance tax down. Almost every possible tax rise on a business or a worker floated in the pages of a national newspaper for week after week after week, with devastating impact on business confidence. A cabinet that is now at war, and a prime minister on the brink. What happened to the promised investment boom? It was driven overseas with punitive measures against investors, which in the case of non-doms could see the country actually lose money. Any juice left in businesses has been squeezed out by tens of billions in tax rises, all to pay for an exploding benefits bill. And what about those workers who Rachel Reeves promised to champion? They've been taxed more, and everyone in Britain, like the country itself, is poorer for it. Prices rising, unemployment up because of her destructive tax on jobs, especially amongst the young. Everyone feeling hard up. An economy no longer serving working people, held hostage by a trade union orthodoxy that we all thought we'd banished decades ago. As one of Keir Starmer's own cabinet ministers, Wes Streeting, said to his friend Peter Mandelson, "There's no growth strategy at all." The British people have been betrayed once again. They voted for change, and instead they just got more decline. They feel cheated, and they have every right to be. What Britain needs is to change course and to forge a new political economy. What Britain needs is reform. Now, today I'm here to explain Reform's approach to the economy. It's not going to be flashy. Some of it is rather technical, so I don't think we need the fireworks and the smoke machine on this occasion, Nigel. Sorry. But it is important. Firstly, Reform believes in fiscal responsibility. We believe Britain's rising debt must be brought under control. Why? Because right now, £1 in every 13 you pay in tax is spent just on the interest on the country's debt. It means we spend more on servicing debt than we do on our schools and defence combined. This year, the cost of borrowing reached the highest level since 2008, far above the level of the so-called mini-budget. Now, Andy Burnham recently said that the government shouldn't be in hock to the bond markets, that it should ignore the flashing red lights. Well, I say the opposite. If you need to borrow money to fund your spending, then you need to convince the lender that you have the wherewithal to pay it. I say to the bond markets that we respect you. The bond markets force governments to face up to difficult trade-offs. Reform welcomes that. Successive governments they've changed, they've broken their fiscal rules, all out the window. They've created what some have coined an idiot premium, where lenders simply don't trust the UK's word. That is costing taxpayers money. So it's got to end. Reform will prepare strict fiscal rules, will take advice from market participants in the period to come. We will instill a fiscal discipline that has been sorely missing, spending only what we can afford and never saddling future generations with the bill for our own profligacy. So the first thing a Reform government will do is to bring Britain back from the brink of a debt crisis by cutting wasteful spending. The root of many of our problems is this. Successive governments have taken more and more of people's money, and they've wasted it. They've sprayed it around with no regard for how hard they've worked for it or their own priorities. They say that your money is needed for the NHS, for the police, for the armed forces, for the vulnerable. But more and more often, it's not going to them. It's going to those who don't need it or shouldn't be getting it. Council houses for migrants, foreign aid to rich countries, billions in welfare for foreign citizens, expensive new cars for those with mild anxiety, colossal payouts to fat cat executives of utility companies that are increasing, not cutting, people's energy and water bills. Reform will get rid of this endemic waste. The work to do this is already well underway. In the last few months, Zia Yusuf and Richard Tice, both highly accomplished, successful businessmen who know how to balance the books and to create jobs, have set out how we'll begin to cut wasteful spending. Reform will make £25 billion in annual savings through measures including ending use of universal credit for foreign nationals, raising the immigration health surcharge and capping foreign aid at £1 billion. Because under a reform government, the interests of the British people will always come first. Additionally, Danny Kruger's plan to streamline the civil service will generate £4 billion in immediate savings from averted salary costs, plus £1 billion in averted pension liabilities for future taxpayers. Reform will be careful with taxpayers' money. Your money, because that is what it is. And we'll never forget that.
Are you looking to get into shape in 2026? If so, then you need the right soundtrack and the right earbuds to match. This video is sponsored by Raycon and their essential open earbuds. Well, unlike regular earbuds, these ones here sit just outside your ear canal, giving you clear sound, but you can still hear what's happening in the world around you. Trust me, they're super light, secure and comfortable with no slipping or soreness thanks to the multi-angular hook and multi-point connection. And with 8 hours of playtime and 36 more with the charging case, it means I only need to charge them once a week. Switching between devices is instant and I can go from my phone to my laptop without missing a beat. And Raycon has over 3 million customers worldwide. Their sound quality is right up there with premium brands, but at a fraction of the price. Plus, there's a 30-day happiness guarantee. The essential open earbuds are here to help you crush your New Year's resolutions. Head to buyraycon.com/GBNews open for 15% off site-wide.
And being careful with your money means tackling our exploding welfare bill. Look, in 2010, the Conservatives undertook commendable reforms to our welfare system. But as time went on, they let it completely spiral out of control, and it's got much worse under Labour. Reform will always protect the vulnerable, those who've worked hard but fallen on hard times. But on current course, 1 in 8 people are set to claim disability benefits in 4 years' time. That's almost 9 million people. The number claiming disability benefits for an attention disorder has more than doubled since COVID. We all know a significant number of these claims are spurious, and that we're just now giving up on over 500,000 young people who are being discarded as unfit to work. So our benefit system is broken. That's not fair, that's not right, and it is an economic and a moral disaster. That's why I commit to you today that if we win the next election, reform will defuse the benefits bomb that is set to bankrupt Britain. We are developing the most comprehensive plan for welfare reform in British politics. Better, more serious, more rigorous than any other of the parties. And we will be setting that out in the months ahead. We will stop those with mild anxiety, depression, and similar conditions from claiming disability benefits, and instead do everything we can to encourage them into the dignity of work. We will reinstate in-person assessments, and require clinical diagnosis to weed out those who are choosing a life on benefits. We will end the abuse of the Motability Scheme, where expensive cars are handed out for conditions like tennis elbow and paid for by working people who could never afford those same cars themselves. And we will make sure that only British nationals can claim benefits in the first place. But we need to go further, because at the moment, the system is not fair to those who pay for it. As a signal of intent today, Reform is changing our policy on the two-child cap for universal credit. The policy was well-meaning. We want to help British working families to have more children. But right now, we just can't afford to do so with welfare. So it has to go. As Reform's Shadow Chancellor, I'm ending it. A Reform government will restore the cap in full. We are the party of alarm clock Britain. We are a party of workers and not welfare. And because we're confident about the approach that we're going to take, we are very happy to have others mark our homework. Everything Reform promise will be fully costed. Accordingly, we will retain the Office for Budget Responsibility. Look, it is far from perfect. The Times recently ranked its performance near the bottom among UK economic forecasters. But the impetus for its creation was a desire to instill fiscal rectitude. And that is something that at Reform, we wholeheartedly endorse. So rather than abolish it, we will reform it. The OBR has consistently overestimated the short-term benefits of migration, and they've downplayed its long-term consequences. They've underestimated the dynamic effect of cutting taxes. So we will break up that cosy consensus and ensure it has proper diversity of opinion. We'll run competitions for super forecasters to join the body and pay proper competitive salaries to those who can most accurately forecast the impact of Treasury decisions. And we'll take a similar approach to the Bank of England. Under Reform, the bank will remain independent. The bank has served our country for over 300 years and has been a model for central banks the world over. But the bank must perform better. Its core mission is simple: keep bills down. And yet, for 52 of the last 56 months, inflation has sat stubbornly over its 2% target. Now, that's not all the bank's fault. Furlough played a part, as has some of the excessive public pay settlements. But the bank has taken its eye off the ball. So we will strip the bank of distractions which have been loaded onto it, and that includes the requirement for the bank to help the transition to net zero. The bank must be a more open institution, and the private sector properly represented on the Monetary Policy Committee. But the fact that the bank will remain independent under Reform will never stop us holding them to account for their mistakes, like the excessive quantitative easing after the financial crisis and during COVID. Reform's interest will always be keeping inflation low, because we are a party of working people, and that is how we keep working people's bills down. But it's not just stubborn inflation that's leaving working people poorer right now. The state is taking more of their money than ever before. Reform believes that taxes are far too high, and that cutting it is crucial to generating economic growth. We see the value in doing so wholesale, where tax clearly disincentivizes work and investment, and in a targeted way to spur investment in the growth sectors of the future, like the biotech industry. We've already set out how we will save businesses like pubs and farms from taxes that are making their business model impossible. We want a simpler, fairer tax system, that incentivizes work, saving, and investment. That means fixing the absurd marginal tax rates that many people face in our country today. So we do intend to review the tax code in a program not seen since the landmark reforms of Nigel Lawson. But we also understand that we can't make tax cuts while running a huge deficit in the vain hope that the Laffer curb alone will do the hard work for us. That is why Nigel drew a line under the previous tax and spend commitments reform had made. As he said in his banking hall speech last year, given the dire state of debt and finances under Rachel Reeves, previous assumptions are no longer realistic. We will never make promises we can't keep to the British people. So we'll only cut taxes when we have generated the fiscal headroom necessary to make those tax cuts sustainable. And to those who question our approach, let me say this. We have seen what happens when this economic rule is ignored and fiscal discipline is thrown out of the window. Liz Truss went down the path of wild spending splurges alongside big tax cuts. The result was chaos. Mortgage payments soared. Working people suffered. Today, I give you my word that a reform government will never play fast and loose with your savings. And with the sure foundation that will come with fiscal stability, we're going to get this economy growing by backing businesses. We know that it's businesses, it's not the government, that are the engine room of our country's wealth. And unlike this Labour government, like this Labour cabinet, reform actually has people who've founded, who've run, who've grown businesses. We actually want businesses to succeed. Because when they succeed, they create well-paid jobs and careers. So people can perhaps buy a better car for their family, or a bigger house, so they can take a holiday, or a second one. So they can have a meal out with the kids once in a while, without having to worry about the bills. We want everyone to be a bit better off. I also want them to be able to get on, to thrive, not just to keep their heads above water. There's no shame in success. Reform believes doing well in life is never something to be embarrassed about. So reform will unashamedly champion British businesses of all sizes. Big businesses, yes, but also small ones, like my dad's, sole traders, and most importantly of all, new businesses, the risk takers, inventing things, solving problems, getting ahead. A reform government will leave you to run your business and to innovate, rather than forcing the lanyard class to run it for you. They don't understand innovation, they stymie it. That means no more mandates for HR or judges setting the wages. It means a return to meritocracy and the pursuit of excellence. So no more diversity targets on company boards. We will scrap red tape. We'll take every effort to make life easier, no matter how small it might seem, like allowing shops to open late, or cafes and bars to put tables and chairs out of an evening without having to fill in endless forms to placate officialdom. We will make Britain the easiest place to open a bank account, and we'll reform bankruptcy laws so that we are a country of second and third chances for those who are willing to take a risk. But it's not just about an overbearing government getting out the way. It's also about government doing its job properly. And that begins by giving businesses confidence to operate in this country. Unlike the other parties, Reform understands that international investors hold deep concerns about sectarianism, crime, and infringements on freedom of speech, because we share them. Only Reform has the courage to tackle these threats to our way of life and our standing in the world. Crime is not normally part of economic policy, but reform will treat it as such. We will ruthlessly pursue the scammers, the shoplifters, the tool thieves that make the lives of business people a misery. Under a reform government, the era of impunity is over. It's time we had the backs of hard-working people who do the right thing, and they know reform will. Now, I'm here speaking to you in the city, 40 years since the Big Bang put London on course to be the world's most important financial centre. But today, let's be honest about where we stand. The London Stock Exchange is struggling. Last year, 2.1 billion was raised in IPOs in the market. In the US, the equivalent was 36 billion pounds, 18 times more. It's no coincidence that as the LSE was dropping, the FCA was enjoying a boom in staff numbers and budget. Recent reforms have clearly not been anything like commensurate with the scale of the challenge our capital markets face. They haven't created the investment culture that our economy desperately needs. Reform will rein in bureaucratic overreach. And as Nigel has said before, we will make London a global centre for crypto assets and digital finance. To compete with the US and others will require genuine creativity and incentives, not just tinkering, as we've seen in recent years. A totally different offer that capitalises on the unique strengths that London still holds. That is what we will set out to do, working with you, with the city, with business, to develop exciting, comprehensive plans. I had my first break in the city, as of course did Nigel, as a trader. We know that Britain needs a thriving financial services sector, and its relative weakness since the financial crisis has hit our productivity. Reform will work with you to bring about a second big bang, and we'll seize opportunities for better, nimbler regulation that Brexit offers. In financial services, yes, but also in data protection, environmental standards, and labour rights. We'll find the edges we can to deliver businesses advantages and, above all, higher living standards for British people. The spirit of deregulation that we are going to engender, of doing less and doing it better, is perhaps best needed in planning. Right now, government is actively stopping companies from building new offices, factories, data centres, labs, the things that would create well-paid jobs. It's also holding young people back from owning their own home and starting their own family. It is so broken that the last time house prices were this expensive relative to wages was in 1876. It's leaving everyone worse off. So reform will liberate planning across city centres and industrial zones. It will make an immediate national priority of densifying inner East London and the building out of Cambridge. We will repeal the ridiculous EU nutrient neutrality rules that are preventing the construction of 100,000 homes for British families. And we'll go further. We'll create a permitted development right for research labs and data centres, streamline permission for factories to be built in our towns. And we're not content with stopping there. We will make sure that businesses have the grid connections that they need to invest in AI, robotics, and manufacturing. And we'll pass legislation to deliver the crucial investment projects that have been bogged down for far too long. If this government fails and continues to fail, we will pass emergency legislation to build a third runway at Heathrow if this project isn't ready to go the day that we take office. After May's local elections, these commitments will matter more than ever before, because it will be clear to everyone that Reform is truly the only national party. And we're going to take that responsibility very seriously. It's a responsibility to ensure that we create opportunities for all parts of our great country, not just London and the South East. Faced with the trade-offs, a reform government will back transport projects with the biggest benefits to working people, not just the ones that are fashionable. That means boosting productivity, the ones that are really value for money, projects that matter to people, like bypasses, flyovers, roundabouts, buses, local rail, and yes, improving the state of our roads. We'll build the links between our towns, our villages and suburbs to allow people and goods to move rather than attempt to drive motorists off the road and into absurd 15-minute cities. Rest assured, under reform, the war on the motorist will end. And a precondition for turning our economy around is the understanding that cheap energy is the driver of prosperity. So a reform government will bring forward measures to cut your bills. That's lower energy bills for people and lower energy bills for businesses. That requires a fundamental change to our energy policy. When Westminster got swept away with net zero fanaticism, Richard Tice was a lonely voice of common sense. He saw, when most other people didn't, the fictional claim of hundreds of thousands of new green jobs. And that is why you can trust reform to scrap the impossible targets that are driving energy costs through the roof. The farce of paying vast amounts of cash for intermittent and unreliable energy delivered at the wrong times. As Richard has announced, we will make full use of the gold buried in the North Sea to keep the lights on and to bring in tax revenue. We will rapidly scale up Britain's nuclear fleet to provide new, cost-effective, reliable sources of power, including by implementing the Fingleton Review of nuclear regulation in full. The result of these policies will be to help cut energy prices, the conditions that we need for Britain to reindustrialise, restore our proud industrial heritage, create good jobs for British working people again. And above all, reform will change the country's economic strategy so that it serves you, the British people. So alongside the fiscal and the regulatory reforms that I've outlined, we will build a more resilient workforce. This will mean radically changing the scale of immigration, and it will also mean changing the makeup of those who are coming here. As Zia Youssef has already set out, and will do so more in the coming days, reform will ensure that any new arrival is a net contributor to our economy. We want tens of thousands of the talented Brits who have emigrated in search of better opportunities and lower taxes to come back home and to contribute to our country. And trust me, under reform, they will come back. We will also make foreign investors welcome in Britain again with a Britannia investment visa, like Zia and Nigel set out last year. Let's be a world leader in AI safety, we're told. Yes, but let's create value and jobs here in the UK. The government's indifference means that we're falling behind. But if we handle the incoming technological revolution nimbly, we can succeed, just as our country did in previous industrial revolutions. It's a generational challenge which must be met head-on by reform. Now, today I've set out the foundations of reform's economic plan. You'll be hearing plenty more from Nigel, from Richard, from Zia, and me in the coming weeks and months. This speech has barely scratched the surface of our ambitions for deregulation, for combating waste, for radically improving productivity in our public services like the NHS whilst keeping it free at the point of delivery, for how we will cut people's bills and leave more money in working people's pockets at the end of the week. There is a great deal of work to do. The list of challenges is vast. No one in reform is pretending that this will be easy. The task of changing course after 30 years of failed economic policies is daunting. It will require deftness, care, and plenty of planning. We will be, in the words of Disraeli, conservative to preserve all that is good, radical to preserve and to remove all that is bad. Now, admittedly, Disraeli was not a very successful chancellor, it has to be said, for those of you who know your history. My inspiration is actually another Robert, also from the outskirts of the Black Country, Robert Peel. He was the architect of Victorian times, the architect of a Victorian age that was marked by both stability and prosperity. He was, as we will be, a reassuring revolutionary. If we get it right, we will see the benefits in real, immediate, catch-up economic growth, with more jobs, higher wages, and lower bills. We'll reduce the cost of energy and help to rebalance the economy. We'll fix planning to ensure that we lift productivity across the country. We'll cut migration, reform welfare to help draw people off welfare and benefits back into the workplace. We'll lower the tax burden and restore the incentives to invest and to build businesses. Rab Butler once described politics as the art of the possible. But right now, it seems that so many people have convinced themselves that progress is impossible, that the decline that we all see today is inevitable. Well, let me say this. Reform has the drive to defeat that defeatism, the energy to lift the gloom, and the courage to take action where others have flinched to get Britain back to its best. Britain's economy is broken, but be in no doubt, it can be fixed. We can turn our country around, but it can only be done with reform. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have some questions from the media now. And the first one I have on my list is Keith from GBNews. Keith.
Keith from GBNews. Mr. Jenrick, can you explain to GBNews viewers how you plan to support Britain's lost generation? You've seen headlines saying that people are out of work, they're struggling. If you become Chancellor, what will you do to give young people hope in this country?
A very good question. Look, it's a very sad situation in the country right now. When I was leaving school, it felt like there was a sense of excitement and buzz still in this country. But when I go around talking to young people, they worry about their future, where they're going to get a job, where they can get on the housing ladder. If they do get a job, they'll be taxed to the hilt, the cost of childcare. It feels like the social contract has been shredded in recent years. Those who went to university during COVID had the best days of their life wrecked due to overbearing regulations. Reform is going to change that. We want to get good jobs back into this economy. And that means ensuring that we don't tax employers to the hilt, as Rachel Reeves has done with her job-destroying increases in national insurance. It means that we are going to ensure that we make the changes in our economy, as I set out today, to house building, to energy, to regulation, to actually spur a new generation of businesses and entrepreneurs, including young people, to create the jobs, the prosperity, the growth that is needed so that they can feel that this country has a great future. They don't need to go off and live somewhere else in the world. Quite the opposite. What we're going to set out to do is to bring all those people back to the UK. That if there's a reform government, people think that this is a country that is getting itself together again, that's heading in the right direction, where there is a sense of buzz and energy and excitement and dynamism. That's our mission. And at the heart of that is going to be young people and their prospects to get a good job and to get on the housing ladder.